this clip here is me at the Pentagon Thursday, asking about. So there was the recent CNN interview where Biden basically said, if they go into Rafah, I made it very clear to Netanyahu, and he was talking tough with CNN. I made it very clear we're not going to give them weapons that are used, offensively in cities. And so this is me challenging the Pentagon on that statement because we're, just days after he said that to CNN, we're already sending $700 million in more tank munitions. And the idea that Israel has not used tanks to go into cities in Gaza is just silly. So you see her get a little heated at me here.
Yeah, I'm going to play the clip. And I'm glad that you brought this up because I covered like this theater the Biden administration been playing where they say, we have a red line until you go into Rafah, while ignoring the fact that they provided all the weapons they needed to go into Rafah. But anyway, let's watch this clip because this is glorious. I'll play it in full, and then I want you to add any thoughts you have as well if after the clip.
Yeah, over here.
Thanks, Sabrina. So last week to CNN, President Biden said that he made it clear that if the Israeli government goes into Rafah, I will not be supplying weapons that have been used historically to deal with cities. Of course, we've seen the Israelis use tanks in urban centers throughout this war, and in the latest arms package, which is now on its way, expected to be approved, and was after Biden issued that statement, is $700 million in tank ammunition. So this statement appears to be false. Is it the Pentagon's assessment that tanks will not be used in the invasion of Rafah?
I think you're significantly oversimplifying things. So what I would tell you to do is to do a little homework on the package that was approved, and that this is long-term sales that will be going to Israel, and the State Department would have more for you on that. In terms of operating within an urban area, the secretary, the president have been very clear that these type of high payload bombs, the 2,000-pound bombs, it's not necessary to be used in an urban area like Rafah. We are still, and I want to be very clear, we are still providing Israel the means to defend itself against its fight against Hamas. And you are still seeing shipments of weapon systems going to Israel, and will continue to go through. That is a commitment this president has made. But when it comes to that one shipment is paused. Really.
Okay, but in the shipment that is not paused is $700 million in tank munitions. And are you saying that I can read you the Biden quote again? I just read it to you.
You don't have to.
Okay, but he said
I made it clear that if they go into,
I want to pause here because I love how that smug, condescending shit live was trying to lecture you about not doing your homework. Meanwhile, you got quotes, and she's like, "No, don't read the quotes." Anyway, I'll play here and I'll pass it right to you.
Rafah.
And here's the quote.
Yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem.
We're not going to supply weapons that have been
historically you don't have to read it to me.
Historically used in cities. So are you saying tanks haven't been used in cities in Gaza?
I would direct you to the State Department for more on the sales. That has to do with sales to Israel. I just don't have that in front of me.
Okay.
Smacked her smug ass down. Anyway, you want any comments you want to add to that? Well done. I immediately got triggered when she was trying to be so condescending to you, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a common strategy is they just act like you're way out of line. So like if you're kind of like, self-conscious, you might be like, oh shit, do I have all my facts right? She kind of referred to that, I guess the most recent package is a State Department approved package, and the Pentagon, which is why the contents are known, because the Pentagon actually doesn't usually make the contents of its packages public. So that was one thing I could have asked also is, okay, regardless of the State Department, are you promising that the Pentagon is no longer sending tank munitions? And the real point of the question is that they did pause that one type of bomb. They paused the 2,000-pound bombs and the 5,000-pound bombs. And so they basically did that to signal to progressives. And like you said, they're kind of acting tough, like, oh, we have a red line about Rafah. Biden's trying to signal to progressive voters, like, look, I really am, trying to play hardball with Netanyahu here, and we're pausing these big bombs. But it's a totally misleading, it's actually a completely false statement when he says we're not providing weapons that have been used to deal with cities, because the Israelis have used tanks in cities for this whole war. So, it's just kind of a sleight of hand where they can trick some of the stupider left-wing voters and say, well, at least we're not giving them these bombs, but they can also appease Israel by continuing to give them, billions in weapons. So it's important to realize this, especially for progressive voters, what the Biden administration is actually doing, which it is not faltering, and it has yet to falter in its support for Israel since the start of the war.
Something I've been reporting a lot on, and there's a reason why the Biden administration has to deny genocide. And there's a reason why it's very important to focus on these weapon shipments, because the United States is in direct violation of Leahy's law. And I always say this, as they implement harsh authoritarian law and order for the working class of this country, we have a ruling class that's essentially lawless. So as they have Israel as invading refugee camps, bombing hospitals, they are doing it with our bombs, which is another reason why it's completely absurd for for Israel, Zionists, and ICC for them to complain about ICC when they didn't put Biden and Blinken and charge them for crimes for enabling this by selling them weapons. And another thing I want to ask you about in general is the military industrial complex, especially like the Republicans and the GOP. They've been pretty crazy recently. Like we're seeing full-fledged United States of Israel shit here. You have like in direct violation of all our laws, the international laws, the Genocide Convention. You have the House that passed a bill that will force Biden to continue weapons to Israel. You had the GOP who even they had a proposal that would have defunded the military effectively if they didn't send weapons shipments to Israel, which obviously the Zionist Democrats are more than happy to accommodate. This be the last thing I'll read, and I'll pass to you for any thoughts. And I saw this today. Once again, our brothers and sisters at Hotspot, they provide. They saw this, and this is crazy. Republicans introduced a bill that will give the IDF the same benefits as a U.S. citizen serving in the U.S. military. So no longer enough for the IDF just to train with the police. They now have these contracts where the IDF will get benefits that military members get. They will have a right to travel to the United States. What's your general thoughts about this?
Well, so I hadn't seen that. I actually just took a screenshot of it on my phone because I'm going to follow up and see who submitted that bill, and definitely going to try to find them on the Hill and ask them about it, because that is just really wild. Yeah. That's kind of next level. I mean, I've been disappointed in Republicans throughout this whole time, but that's really next level stuff. Yeah, I mean, Republicans, some of them were good on Ukraine. Some of them in private are good on Israel. I mean, I've had private conversations with a lot of kind of the MAGA staffers who are really sick of, giving so much money to Israel, although the candidates are afraid to say it because of all their evangelical voters. And I've heard that verbatim, that, there are Republican candidates who are just afraid of their evangelical voter base. So they won't come out and say what they think.
In my thought, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. And this should concern a lot of these Republican voters, because I think they can influence those evangelicals. I think they're not so much afraid of the voters. It's AIPAC. Like, if there's any Republican that
there's a lot of that. There's for sure a lot of AIPAC Republicans. I'm talking more about kind of the MAGA Republicans who don't get
that's fair.
AIPAC,
okay.
and if anything, AIPAC hates them, but they're still afraid of their evangelical voter base. And I don't know if you saw, related to the ICC ruling as well, Brian Mast, who's the former IDF soldier, dual Israeli citizen who's in Congress.
Oh yeah.
Tweeted out something like, hey ICC, if you go after our allies, you're going to find out what happens to you, or something. So he kind of just issued this weird, vague threat to the ICC, as if
is this him, Brian Mast? This boy, he sends the craziest and also the funniest tweets you'll find on X.
Yeah, no, he's really psychotic. And I there's actually a video at the Gray Zone not too long ago where I went up to him and I asked him, do you think from the river to the sea Palestine will be free? Do you think that's a call to genocide? And he goes, well, yeah, no, it's definitely a call to genocide. And then I asked him, I said, okay, then when Netanyahu says from the river to the sea there will only be Israeli sovereignty, was that a call to genocide? He's like, no, it's just kind of a factual statement. And then he closed the interview by saying, how about this? He's like, from the river to the sea Palestine will never be. So he just kind
I
of
seen that actually. I know exactly what you're talking about.
okay, yeah, no. So he he calls something a call to genocide. He blatantly just says the exact same thing, and just has no self awareness apparently. He's a really psychotic dude. I mean, honestly, when you talk to him, he looks like he's like also kind of medicated up. Like he's really not 100% there. And
They live a comfortable life,
comments
but I truly do. They live a comfortable life, but I truly believe that selling out this aggressively, it does something to your soul, man. Like you can be comfortable all you want, but it does something to you. Go ahead.
no, for sure, exactly. And he kind of has that vibe where you're talking to him and you're like, just this guy is like, this guy's just kind of evil. Like, that's kind of the vibe I
Yeah.
got when I talk to him, to be completely honest. And it's just wild. It's just wild people like that serving Congress. It really is.
And this is unrelated to my topic, but I brought this up because you mentioned it when I came after him and damn near ratio to pretty much a ratio today. He said this is what he said, just to let you guys know the craziness of buying masks. He said it was revealed that the Chinese Communist Party is funding the anti-Semitic protest we've seen spring up across college campuses. The CCP is allying with pro-Hamas sympathizers to undermine our country. Like, this is the kind of shit you get from these anti-China hawk Republicans. I just simply said anti-China hawks are the dumbest people in political discourse and got a nice grand off of that. We can get back on topic unless you have anything you want to add.
It's sorry. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay, I got a call and it kind of interrupted it. Yeah, I mean, that's like, you hear that about Soros too, and you hear that, and like Soros, I mean, Soros does fund, district attorneys and things like that. But it's like anytime there's like some like super tenuous chain of funding that like, some New York Post reporter strings together, as if these college students aren't just organically angry about kids being buried under rubble every day. It's like, oh no, it's actually China just fooling them into caring about genocide. It's just so it's really like paranoid and weird, and it's as crazy as kind of the Trump. It's like the Trump Russia stuff, but on the right now. And any hate for Israel couldn't possibly be organic. It's got to come from China or George Soros.
They have different wings of the empire, and they have to manage them. So to get Republicans to support war is pretty easily in general. They got them to support the war against China, viewing China as hostile. They can get them to support Israeli wars by simply calling anyone who opposes Israel or any Arab Muslim a terrorist. And you just say that, they all on board. You know what I mean? It's very easy to get them convinced. With liberals, you got to do different stuff. Like, they learned that the elections.
Hitler. Yeah,
Hitler. Feel free to interrupt anytime. This is a fun conversation. But they also will put stuff like Russiagate, the elections. So now, I don't know if you've seen these stories about when they're saying that in the upcoming election, China wants to get involved. Iran want to get involved. Russia want to meddle in our election again. That's how they get the liberal wing of the empire on board with their wars. So they always get different strategies. Feel free if you want to chime in before you move on.
No, I mean, I thought you made a good point on kind of like Republicans. You bring up Muslims and you bring up terrorists, and Republicans get all up in arms. And I kind of naively thought before October 7th, when I was seeing a lot of the populist Republicans support me in my kind of questioning of the Ukraine narrative, I was like, oh, okay, it looks like a lot of Republicans have kind of evolved from this stupid mindset of like Muslims or terrorists, evolved from the Bush days. And I was just super disappointed to see everybody snap back. I think there is like a solid base of people who have moved past it. I think Tucker Carlson is slowly getting there. He hasn't been like great on. I know he is good on Israel. He's just kind of been like kind of timid about how he talks about it. But he did just have Dave Smith on, who's the big libertarian, who's like one of the strongest anti-Israel voices out there. So
Tucker is the one person who surprises me. Everyone else doesn't surprise me. I'm surprised that Tucker is actually like talking about Israel. When Tucker first started his anti-empire thing, I'm like, oh, they're just a fucking grift. And I have no trust in this guy, but he has been consistent. Like, he's not great on China, but he questioned why we should hate China. You know what I mean? So I was surprised that he been consistent. Everyone else showing their true colors wasn't surprising to me, but I could see why people thought they was legit. I could see why people thought that, but a lot of it was them trying to own the libs because the liberals support Ukraine, and that was kind of obvious to me. Anything else you want to add? Feel free.
Yeah, I mean, Tucker, I don't know too much about his China opinion, but I know for a fact he wouldn't support the U.S. going to war over Taiwan and doesn't support all of our, South China Sea meddling. But yeah, it's a shame. Yeah, they were good on Ukraine. I think you're right. It was a lot of kind of reactionary politics against the left, who were just so pro Zelensky that people felt the need to take the other side. I do think there's a strong, not only Tucker, but Tucker's obviously one of the most influential. So there is a strong base that actually have changed, that actually are less interventionist. They're finally sick of like the forever wars. There are people like that. There's been a lot of disappointments though. I mean, like guys like Chip Roy, guys like, uh, you know, Thomas Massey, I guess, has been good. I'm trying to think of some like Ron Johnson, Mike Lee. These are guys who are really good on Ukraine, and those are guys who probably maybe are getting some APAC money. But it's a shame, and I wish we could get some bipartisan coalition. Someone to stand with Rashida Tlaib and those squad members who are actually brave on this issue.
We are living in the strangest of times, and people are having a hard time adjusting to it and dealing with it. I don't believe that the institutions of the right have changed, but I do believe that there was a shift among the populace in the right. And this is the same with the left and the Democratic Party because it's an overall trend of the duopoly bleeding support. So the same way you have a lot of progressives who became more radicalized, a lot of people are calling themselves communists now, a lot of these people left the Democratic Party. We're seeing the same thing with the Republicans on another scale where there are people who are still conservative in principle, but they're done with the duopoly. And they may not say it the same way we say it. They may not use the same terms that we say. But when they come out against the wars, when you see these right-wingers who criticizing Israel, that's a part of them leaving the duopoly. And they will never. And these same people, they're going through some shit too because they seeing them agree with me. Like a lot of these people who on the right who hate the duopoly, who done with the Republican establishment, they see me, an unapologetic communist, a black communist revolutionary, and they're like, why am I agreeing with this? I thought I hate communism. So you guys see this big shift going on, and it's confusing the hell out of everybody. Because a lot of these right wingers who left the Republican Party, it is my personal opinion that they have no reason to call themselves on the right anymore. Because you guys know how I define left versus right. But I know you want to chime in. Feel free if you want to chime in. I'll tell you I'm mute.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, there is kind of that coalition. Like I'm traditionally libertarian, and I feel, I'm at the gray zone and Max Blumenthal and I have really never talked about our economic views at all because we agree so strongly that the most important and pressing issue right now is the war machine, which is not only kills, millions of people, but now it's pushing up against other nuclear powers like China and Russia, which is just insanity that we would even be testing things like that. I mean, it's just so crazy. The fear of nuclear weapons doesn't exist like it did in the 60s and 70s, and we kind of need that healthy fear because I've been in the Pentagon many times, and I go to that was at the Pentagon, that video we just played. You kind of get the sense people are on autopilot. Like people, they go there, it's their day job. Like there's people sitting around eating lunch, talking about the weather and things like that. And it's kind of the banality of evil where these people forget that they're kind of like on board the Death Star, and like everyone's kind of working towards more destruction and potentially like unimaginable levels of destruction. So people need to wake up to this. I try to do that in those briefing rooms. On Israel, I will say some of the reporters, like there's an Al Jazeera reporter in there. And a lot of the reporters have been good on Israel. Nobody was good on Ukraine, but some of the reporters have asked good questions on Israel. So if people check out those briefings, they'll see a lot of reporters pushing back because it's just so egregious and it's so kind of obvious, even to those with low IQ, that what's going on in Gaza is just objectively evil.
This is why I'm for coalition. I'm for solving issues in terms of coalitions. And there's like this faction of what I call Twitter communists who I think they are designed to make us look bad. Who they legitimately don't believe in that. Like a lot of these people who support the Ukraine war, but they didn't want to organize with libertarians who was against the Ukraine war out of principle. I think because we're fighting an empire the likes we've never seen before, an establishment the likes we've ever seen before, I am full support of coalition building with people who support me on ideas that's pressing. Meaning, I am for organizing with libertarians to challenge the police state, challenging the military-industrial complex. And then, when it comes to economic issues, our coalitions will fight on that. That's why I legitimately believe. I think that's the best way forward, because I am someone who likes talking about labels. I think it's interesting to talk about what words mean. I think it's interesting to see where you fall on the political. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I think it's just interesting as a nerd. But even though I find it interesting, I'm not obsessed over it. You know what I mean? If you call yourself a libertarian, we agree on war. All right, that's interesting. Let's work together to get it done. Any last thoughts on that? And we can move on.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's like we've got a war machine we've never seen the likes of before, and it's like, why would you not come together to oppose that? You know.